Welcome to the Geek Soup Podcast, a twice-weekly show where we talk about all things pop culture to tickle your nerd bone. No matter where you're coming from, no matter who you are or who or what you identify as long as you don't identify as a serial killer or Lord Voldemort, you are welcome here. This is a safe space for you. Welcome to the soup. All right, this is the inaugural episode of the Geek Soup Podcast. Thanks for tuning in when and wherever you are. I'm your host, Kate. I'm obviously super excited for this, even if nobody listens in. You know, pop culture is all around us, and I'd be lying if I said I wasn't a complete sucker for it. And when I say it in this instance, I mean video games, specifically Dragon Age. All right, so this podcast is being released shortly after Bioware came out with the Dragon Age 4 trailer and behind-the-scenes look. And if I didn't already have theories before, ooh boy, do I have them now. I bet you do too. So I'd love it if you'd subscribe to the podcast and make sure to check out the Geek Soup Patreon to join our Discord server and join us in the discussion. You'll get access to so many extra goodies, and I can't wait for you to see what we have in store. Okay, now that it's out of the way, let's get into it. And I mean, like, right into it. All right. I don't even want to touch Dragon Age 4 right now. I can probably already tell that I'm not one that's speechless. But I was speechless. I'm really excited about it. I do have to also express my caution because I'm really hoping that it's not so focused on multiplayer. I really enjoyed, the DLCs. I'll buy them. Sure. Absolutely. I'll buy them. But, what they did with Andromeda was kind of cool in that the story itself was larger. And I'm sure if Andromeda had continued, there would have been DLCs to come. But with Andromeda, it was that you had the opportunity to play multiplayer. It was similar to what they'd done in the original Mass Effect trilogy. So I'm really, really hoping that EA doesn't come in and say, okay, no, it's multiplayer or bust, and the actual, RPG is small. However, in saying that, I know Dragon Age Inquisition came out in 2014, so we've had, 6 years between then and now, and things probably have changed. But I feel like Dragon Age, you still have the multiplayer component, but the story itself was so broad and so far-reaching, and the world was so beautiful that I'm really, really hoping that that's what they do for this next game. So we're not even going to get into that just yet. I want to focus mainly on Inquisition in this episode. I have so many thoughts about Inquisition. I probably vlogged, I don't even want to admit how many hours I've vlogged playing that game. I haven't touched multiplayer, and I'll just come right out and say it, I'm not ashamed. I play mostly casual or easy level on the Dragon Age games, from Origin to Dragon Age 2 to Inquisition, and I probably will for 4. It's not so much about the combat for me as it is about the story, because let's be honest, Bioware has the best character development, had the best character development in the video game industry. So my main thing with Inquisition was, after the Jaws of Hakkon DLC was released, it would have been nice, and this might be good for a remaster, but for me, having an Avar Inquisitor would have been great. Here's why. Even though there are different tribes, so they're broken up into 3, right? Chastened, Avar, Elamari, and even amongst those tribes, the Avar, especially as we see in Jaws of Hakkon, there are different clans that are at war with each other, that believe different things, that, I don't know, spoiler alert, might just be trying to resurrect an old god. But regardless, that all of those tribes came from the Elamari. All of those tribes split from the Elamari, which, of course, we know that Andraste was part of. And the Inquisitor, at least in the beginning is called the Herald of Andraste. Side note, did anybody else ever feel tempted to make a male inquisitor named Harold, just so it would sound like they were saying his first name? Every time they said Harold, I saw that flash through my brain. Anyway, Mathrath, Andraste's husband, was Avar and is considered a traitor for killing her. So, through that, it just would open up so much more lore, which is my favorite thing. I love lore. Even when it's pixelated lore, it's still lore. With that, she would have had the deeper connection to Andraste. It would have been even more of a scandal on both sides. And she would have had a deeper connection to Solas, who, of course, is, again, spoiler alert, so stop listening if you are getting into Dragon Age, or you haven't played Inquisition, or you don't know anything about DA4. Solas is the Dread Wolf. He is one of the old gods from the Elven Pantheon. And he is all about spirits. He is all about, the old gods. He's all about causing shit and just causing shit, basically, which, let's be honest, most of the mages in the games that have been our companions are all about. I'm looking at you, Morrigan and Anders. But with that, there would have been a deeper connection to that. There would have been more of an understanding to that, and probably more of an ignorance to how things are, and especially when they're in the Temple of Mythal at the end, towards the end of the main story in Inquisition. It would have just been more of like, wow, okay, I'm open to this, but it's a completely different pantheon. This is lowlander shit, right? So I just felt like it would have been a more immersive experience in that way. Of course, in the Jaws of Hakon DLC, again, spoiler alert, if you haven't played the Jaws of Hakon DLC, I 100% recommend it. It is so much fun, and it's long. It's unbelievably beautiful. As far as Sunhair, which is the fifth thing, says to avenge a wrong is a good thing, but only a fool lights the world on fire to do it. And here's the thing. Here's looking at you, Solas, when she says that. To avenge a wrong is a good thing, but only a fool lights the world on fire to do it. Now, of course, the dialogue changes regardless of where you are in the main story. But could you imagine after the end of the main story in Dragon Age Inquisition, when you find out that Solas is the Dread... Well, when you find out that Solas has left, and you as the player knows that he's the Dread Wolf. It would have been interesting if you found that. It would just been so poignant. But then, of course, the whole thing about an Avar-born Inquisitor saving the basin from Hakon would be a great story as well. But also, something new. We always, that human noble origin, the human mage, elven mage, the elven, rogue, we get the dwarf. I was so excited to have a Kunari option in Dragon Age Inquisition. The different dialogue options, the different cultural things. The one thing that upsets me about this, though, is, and again, I understand that Bioware is probably under great stress when it comes to pleasing EA. They probably, look at Andromeda, guys. Like, they were under the nail for that one. And it came out, it just felt incomplete. And there are some things in Dragon Age Inquisition that feel incomplete. Of course, it's when you have an Elven Inquisitor, mage, rogue, warrior, whatever your class is, walk into the Temple of Mythal, and Morrigan, who, okay, yes, she is the daughter of Mythal or Flemeth, but Morrigan has to educate the Elven Inquisitor about Mythal. Even if that Elven Inquisitor has Mythal's Valisleen on their face. So, Bioware, let's get some, interesting cultural dialogue, because I think that in Dragon Age 4, it's gonna be similar gameplay to Dragon Age 2, where it's specifically one race, and you can choose warrior, mage, rogue, like we did with Hawk, but I feel like it's going to be more of an elf because we're now into winter. Solus is trying to tear down the veil. The elven magic is starting to reemerge. Elves everywhere are slowly starting to go and meet him. And I just feel like, and I honestly very much hope that we are forced to have an elf hero, just like we were in Dragon Age 2. Now, I'm open to dwarf, Kunari, human, whatever. But the cool thing about the elves and how they're represented in the Dragon Age trilogy, well, I guess, what would you call it? Quadrology? No? I'll have to look that up. In the Dragon Age series, the way that elves are represented is kind of as serfs. They're very much looked down upon. And I think it'd be very poignant for what we are going through right now, that if the underdog was the hero. Because let's be honest, in real life, the underdog very, very, very often is the hero. Okay? Black Lives Matter. If you don't agree with me, do not listen to this podcast. All right? Okay, let's continue on with Dragon Age. All right, so on the topic of the elves, I have some questions. I have some predictions. I have some hopes that that I often get dashed. For me, I come into games after they're popular, mostly because does anybody else have that anxiety that's like if you're watching a really good movie that you have to spoil the ending for yourself because you're just so anxious about how it'll turn out because you get so attached to these characters? That's how I am. Or I go to the bathroom during really intense times and I just look it up later on my own term. It's just my anxiety does that. So that's why I kind of get into these games afterwards. And then, there's also that anxiety of being like, why can't I play the next one yet when you just like bomb through the first one? So I have a theory that I know is shared by quite a few, if Archive of Our Own is any indication. Also, big shout out to Archive of Our Own. I love that site. Fanfiction writers are amazing. But what if the old elven gods are actually still here? What if tearing down the veil doesn't free them? It just gives them back their power. What if they're still here? What if somebody like Gillinan survives on through the Hala? Right? In Dragon Age 2, Flemeth, which we don't know at that point as Mythal, says that there's little pieces of herself. She gives Hawk an amulet so that if Morrigan instructs you to destroy Flemeth as the dragon in Dragon Age Origins, she always has a little piece of herself, a little piece of Flotsam. So what if the Hala, because they're so revered and they're so connected to Gillinan, are Gillinan's Flotsam? Right? So what if she lives on? Like, what if the Golden Hala are her Flotsam? What if when Solus tears down the veil, the old elven gods awaken in their earthly forms? Elves are returning and disappearing to the woods, was what we hear after the Trespasser DLC. And magic is awakening in elves that didn't have it before. And we know that Mythal, as Flemeth, and Solus were able to survive into the Dragon Age. So what about the others, though? And I honestly, I will defend my Gillinan theory till the end of time, because I just have this feeling that the Golden Hala are integral to Gillinan, that all of this revelation of the Hala, we're going to find out something more about Gillinan. And I hope I'm saying her name right, Gillinan, but I want to say Gillinan. Especially because in the Inquisition, we find that there are clues that have been left for Gillinan, right? There's Gillinan's Grove, but we don't really have, we have the Steps of Andrul, but we don't really have anything that's specific to Gillinan, and I feel like that was a big hint. I feel like they may have escaped. Of course, in the Sunken Library that we find in Trespasser, we see that there are memories lived on about we're going to kill Dreadwolf. So maybe not all of them were able to escape. But maybe there are some that have lived on, like Mythal or Flemeth was able to. Because when Flemeth speaks of Mythal, she speaks of her as a separate entity. So it's almost like a clingers-on, like a goddess, a god suckerfish that has clinged on for dear life to these other living beings to take them through the ages until there will be a reckoning, Mythal says. I also am curious about Flemeth. I really would love Flemeth to make a reappearance in Dragon Age 4. I know at the end of Trespasser DLC we see her kind of turn to stone as if the Dread Wolf has absorbed her essence, but Mythal was like the All-Mother, and I don't know about it. Flemeth has been such a key character in all 3 Dragon Age games that why wouldn't she come back? And if she does, then it'll just be another way that Bioware has broken my heart. Now, this is a theory that I have heard from quite a few other people, mostly on Tumblr, because that's where I get my geekgasms, is that maybe Morrigan, like her mother, is Sileis. So, mythologically, in the Elven Pantheon, Sileis is the Hearthkeeper. And Andrew says, I am sister of the moon, mother of hares. Now, we don't know if Andrew and Sileis were actually sisters, but they either fought alongside each other, fought each other, or maybe they were sisters or sister warriors or something like that. The history has been really lost by the Dalish. But in reference to that quote, Morrigan is often considered the goddess of the moon to the Druids, and like real life Druids. She is the moon's 3 phases, new, waxing, and old. And that ties into Flemeth. New, waxing, and old. Just think about it. Morrigan's symbols include fire, and Sileis gave the elves fire. Sileis was the master of all domestic arts. It stands to reason that Morrigan could possibly carry a piece of flotsam of Sileis with her as well, especially if her mother, well, as far as we know, is Flemeth. Maybe Mythal gave birth to all of the old gods. Perhaps Sileis and her had that mother-daughter relationship. Perhaps Sileis was empathetic or sympathetic to Mythal. Perhaps Sileis and Mythal were closer than what we thought. Now, this is, of course, just a theory that's based on real-world examples, of course, of the Morrigan, which is a goddess, a Celtic goddess of the moon, and also her symbol is ravens, which we get a lot of in the Celtic as well. And it stands to reason that the writers at Bioware would take these real-life examples and place them into this world, even just for character development, but for some kind of familiarity. And I think that's really how they do it. That's how they get us to really care about these characters, because there's just that something that clicks in our brain that we think, oh yeah, okay, this is familiar to me. And thus, I care about this character, which makes sense. That is a great theory. I don't know if I completely agree with it. I think it might be a little stretching. Of course, Andraste is also, there was an Andraste. She was a Mycenic goddess in real life. So it's not like it's unprecedented for Bioware to do something like that. I don't know. What do you guys think? Is Morrigan Sileis? Does Gillenon live on through the Hala? The third one that I want to talk about is Andrul. Or there's a theory that is out there that Sarah is Andrul. And I don't know about this because, and I'll get the one thing, and I mean, I can understand Sarah has the bows. Liliana also does. She also works in shadow, which is very much like an owl, but Liliana is with the ravens. But the one thing about Sarah being Andrul is that, yes, she's an elf, And yes, she's kind of lost her way, so I understand that. But she also is one of the companions that you don't have to pick up. She's like Vivienne. You know, you're not quote unquote stuck with her like you are Varric or Solus, well, Solus for the time being, or Cassandra. You can pick and choose. And I feel like any of the companions that you can pick and choose likely will have roles, but aren't major players the way Flemeth and Solus are. I personally have played playthroughs where I haven't picked Sarah up at all. I've played playthroughs where she's been, one of the first that I go get once I get to Val Royale, and I just can't see her being Androl. Sorry, I cannot see her being Androl. But if you think she's Androl, if you have any other theories or comments, or you think I am just dead wrong, or you think I'm onto something, let me know. Join our Discord server, or stay tuned to the end of the episode and I will make sure to spell out my email address and how to sign up for Discord to get in on the discussion. One other thing I want to talk about is Sandal. Sandal, our favorite enchanter. All right, so we have Dagna, who of course is our enchanter, a dwarf, and then of course in the Descent DLC we get to learn a little bit more about dwarves and their ties to what they call the stone. Spoiler alert, the Titans, which is a whole nother topic that I'm not going to go into right now. That'll be for our next get together. But with Dagna, she still doesn't dream. However, things that have magical attributes talk to her. They sing to her. They make her have visions, which is very interesting. Now, when we talk to Dagna, she talks about another dwarf that can enchant, but she says her mind isn't that wonky. And of course, she is talking about Sandal. Now, there are a lot of different theories about Sandal. We meet him first in Dragon Age Origins, where him and Bodan Fedek just happen upon you. They just happen upon the warden that is going to change Ferelden. All right? And they help you out. Sandal can enchant your weapons for you. And his favorite thing to say is enchantment. And Bodan gives you a bit of a background on him and says, hey, he's not all there, but he is an amazing enchanter. He's not actually my son. I found him in the Deep Roads. Okay? Number 1. Now, in number 2, if you go in and you're looking at the primeval lyrium, this is when you find the lyrium idol, and of course, Varric's brother goes insane and locks you in. And before all that happens, before all the drama, we figure out that we have to go looking for Sandal. And Sandal can enchant where he can actually freeze an entire Darkspawn ogre. Just frozen solid. So there's definitely something special about Sandal with his runes and his enchantments that make him all-powerful. So a lot of people think that this is a symbol of him being the Maker. I was thinking maybe he is Andraste or somehow connected to her. Now, bear with me. I know. Why would a dwarf be Andraste? Now, this is going to go into a real-world example, just like we've spoken about previously. So Sandal, which is usually spelled Sandal with 2 L's, or in Scandinavian or Norse, which of course is what I theorize the Avar and Alamari are based on. Sandal, so it's Sandahl, is traditionally a girl's name, and it means defender of mankind. So this could relate to both the Maker and Andraste. Also, in some Slavic languages, a variant on Sandal's father's name, so it's Bohdan instead of how they spell it, Bodahn, means gift of God. And going on that, we know that Bodan found Sandal in the Deep Roads, so we don't actually know Sandal's true origin. What if Bodan was sent by the Maker, God, to aid Sandal and by extension Andraste, or, in the Sandal being the maker theory, himself. Sandal can also enter the crossroads in the Trespasser DLC, as we know from finding his things in the Shattered Library. So I think that this can also tie into a theory that Sandal has an elven mother. He has the lyrium in his veins and has the notice of the Titan. That's a lot to decompress, but there's definitely something in Sandal that makes him that much more powerful and able to physically enter the Fade. Because his things are there. His things are physically there. You're physically there as the Inquisitor. You're picking those things up and touching them. It has to mean that either Sandal is having lucid dreams. He's one of the dreamers. Or he can physically enter the Fade, and I think that it's probably the latter. Well, I think he can probably do the former as well, but I think he can actually physically enter the Fade, which is something that we know that dwarves just don't do. Now, some people will come back to me and say, look, what if dwarves can do that once the Titans wake up? What if it's because the Titans are sleeping? That the dwarves' powers just aren't there? That's something that remains to be seen, I think, anyway. And then if Sandal had an elven mother, maybe he looks more like a dwarf, but he possesses the magical abilities of the elves. And when Solus is starting to tear down the veil and the elven magic is starting to come out, that's why Sandal is able to do these things. But that doesn't really work because Sandal's been able to do these things even before Solus woke up. He must have some form of lyrium-induced magical ability if he's able to physically enter the crossroads. How is he, and how is he able to control the Illuvians? Or, maybe we just missed him. Maybe he simply hitched a ride through the Canary, right? I've left you without any answers. These are just theories. These are mostly what-ifs. I do also want to bring more notice to the Iceni goddess Andraste. If Bioware is using real life examples and they're injecting them into the world of Thedas, then that's going to give you a whole bunch of theories. So this first episode, I just said I was going to do about 30 minutes. It looks like we are coming up on time. So I want to dive into a cool segment that, I probably got your blood boiling if you don't agree with my theories, or even if you do, and even if you're just so excited for these new trailers that I think I'm going to use another episode to talk about. This might calm you down a little. This is only good news. This is only good news on the Geek Soup Podcast. All right. So for only good news today, I'm going to recommend My Brother and Me for a podcast that you should listen to next. They are hilarious. The McElroy brothers are amazing. They have so many other podcasts, including Adventure Zone, which is like a podcast D&D, Dungeons and Dragons adventure. It's incredible. Please check them out. But if you want to just laugh at some really, really funny dudes, definitely look up My Brother and Me with Justin, Travis, and Griffin McElroy. I also want to bring some attention to everybody here probably has subscribed to or seen videos by the Dodo on Facebook. And the Dodo features a shelter in Crete, in Greece, called Takis Shelter. It's run by a gentleman who used to own nightclubs, but sold everything, gave up his entire life to rescue dogs on Crete because there is a massive stray problem there. And you'll get to know that I am an insane animal person. We have so many animals here that we're not supposed to have. You don't know where I am, so you can't come and get me. But I am a sucker for dogs and cats and anything animal. And this man gave up everything and rescues dogs and then adopts them out. And he lives on pennies just so these dogs can have a good life. And I think he has over 300 dogs in the shelter now, and he is always taking donations. I've donated to him on a recurring basis. Of course, it's in euros, so Canadian dollars don't go too far, but every little bit helps. So please, if you can, please look him up on the Dodo or on Facebook. It's Takis Shelter Nonprofit. All right. I'd like to end our inaugural episode, where I've probably talked and rambled too much already, with a quote from Paddock Wicks. He is an STG operative in the Mass Effect universe that you meet under certain circumstances. I'm not going to do any spoilers here, but I really like this quote because I think that, especially during this time, it's so pertinent for all of us to remember that, as he says, somewhere deep in the fabric of reality, our actions are recorded and remembered. And somewhere deep in the fabric of reality, those actions will be remembered for all eternity. Thank you so much for tuning in. I can't wait until our next episode together. Be sure to check me out on Patreon at patreon.com/geeksoup. GEESOUP. You can also check me out online on my website at www.thegeeksoup.com. You can also find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook when you search at the Geek Soup Pod. I can't wait until our next time to get geeky together, and look forward to sipping the soup on our next episode. Until then, stay geeky.